Alrighty, we are now joined once again by Chief Baseball Officer of the Boston Red Sox, Heim Bloom. Heim, I got to tell you, this is a big moment. It's your third appearance on ITM, and based on our criteria, that means you are now in the ITM Hall of Fame. Do you have a speech? Just how is this going to change your life moving forward?
Wow, it's a privilege. I'm honestly, it's humbling.
Mm.
Um, there's so much that went into this moment. So many people who had my back on the way here. Just can't thank everybody enough.
It's you, Mike Brenly, and my dad. Those are the three that are in the
That
group.
makes me feel even more humbled.
Yes,
That is an
exactly.
exclusive club.
So your name's going in the rafters. You're gonna have, a whole induction weekend. We'll let you know the specifics soon. But yeah, glad that you're honored and humbled and all the key words there. Of course, we're gonna talk deadline. We're gonna talk deadline. I know we talked to you in spring training, and I think last year around the deadline. This year it's a different deadline, but a lot of fans probably looking at it as similar. Not a ton of moves, really close to no moves. How close were you guys to making more moves than just Arias?
There were a lot of different things that could have happened Monday, Tuesday, some closer than others. And that's not different from most deadlines, but, it was interesting. Obviously, a lot of those things will never see the light of day, I think, but different things that could have happened. And just given the position we were in, a lot of different things that we could consider. And just did our best to stay true to all the things we talked about and all the things we care about. It's been a really interesting year. I know this position in the standings, the playoff odds, whatever, a lot of that is probably looks very similar to last year. How we've gotten here, the way we're doing it, in my mind, is very different. And it has been, I remember when we talked in spring training, there obviously a lot of, let's see how this goes around the team, but I felt pretty confident it was going to be a fun group. And it has been. It's been a really fun group to be around. There's a lot of belief in that room. The group, you could tell in spring training, this group was coming together well. Now it's a tough mountain to climb, and obviously there have been ups and downs. We've been far from perfect, but there has been a lot of progress, especially from some key guys, some guys who were going to be here, some guys that we're counting on, and that's been the coolest part of this season so far.
So you mentioned the underdog line after in your presser, and we find out. So your presser was right after the deadline because you had to catch a flight. That's how that goes?
That is what happened. Yeah.
Okay, because I saw 6:15 and I'm like, are you guys normally still on calls? Do the phones go down the second 6 o'clock hits? I always want to know like behind the scenes of what it's like leading up right to 6 o'clock.
Yeah, it's kind of a scramble, but the way it is now, unless I guess there can be carve outs, maybe if there's a communication snafu, but it the deadline is the deadline a lot more than it was in the old days. I think like if you don't have the call in or the move entered or a time stamped email from everybody involved, it's no deal.
Okay.
And it really is about as close to a pencils down type thing as can be. I've heard about some situations. Maybe there was a communication snafu, or email got caught in a server or something like that, where they allow it. But pretty much is a deadline. Now, sometimes it takes some time afterwards for MLB to approve the deals, and they have to go through everything that comes in at the buzzer. It might take time to notify players, and obviously then to announce the deals. But really, they're all supposed to be done by the deadline.
So I get back to the underdog thing. You mentioned that in your press conference after the deadline. I think Kenley reacted in saying, "Oh, I use this as motivation now. We're going to be, like a no one believes in us type of vibe." I feel like you probably said that as, I don't want to say a throwaway, but not as this like proclamation of we are underdogs. But it seems like that line's been taken and kind of run with by fans and maybe some of the players.
Yeah. Well, look, obviously, like, I spoke to our media, and then right after that, they go in the clubhouse with what I said. So obviously, they're going to work that into their questions
Yeah.
to our players, which is fine. Um, I did not think that was going to be the big deal it was, in part for two reasons. One, we're not in a playoff spot right now, folks. That's just a fact. We got work to do. We can do it. We're capable of doing it. We like our team, but it is a fact. And I think just about everybody I said that to, in fact, I'm pretty sure every single one of them picked us to miss the playoffs this year. So I didn't think it would be that controversial in that crowd. I do find that interesting that folks who don't believe in us are on my case for saying that. But it's part of the deal. We like our group, and the group believes in itself, but we got work to do. And this group has been doubted from day one. That's also a fact. I mean, you guys know that, and we've had to work hard to improve, and every little bit of belief that this group has established, we've had to work hard for it, and we're going to have to keep working hard for it. But there is belief in that room, and hopefully it'll continue to be reflected on the field.
The underdog Sox. I don't think this is a bad thing. I think this can be a rallying cry. Get behind, this team for the last couple of months. I'm kind of in your boat. I was surprised that it took on a meaning that I thought it didn't really need to take on. I mean, you're 2.5 games out right now. If the Jays win the finale, it's 3. Yeah, not favored to make the playoffs. That's kind of the definition of an underdog. But yeah, if they got to use it as motivation, I'm sure you've seen players use all sorts of things as motivation before. So it's like, sure, whatever you guys need, go for it. I am curious what you think and what you would deem a successful trade deadline. We spend so much time, oh, they should have done this, they should have done that. Why didn't this happen? From your position and knowing what the proposals were, knowing what you would have had to give up, knowing what the team is now, what it's going to be in the near future, what's a successful deadline like to you?
Every year is a little different. I think if you ask anybody who's in my position, if they're hoping to make a lot of moves going into the deadline, I think the answer would generally be yes. Because, anytime you do that, it's because you feel you matched up on something that's going to be good for your organization. And, going back to a couple of the moves we made last week, we were able to make a few. But look, if you had told me, would I rather have made 10 or 12 deals on Monday, Tuesday, I would have said, yeah, because that means we would have found a lot of things that we thought were good for us and made us better. But ultimately, you really should only be making moves that you do think are in your interest and you do think help your organization. And that's what that means is different every year. But, you try to do the best you can, kind of sorting through what's what, figuring out what to pursue, figuring out what you should accept, how far you're willing to go. And the interesting thing about it, there's always a lot of stuff flying in the moment. You try to do the best you can with, making the right choices, making the right deals. And then you look back on it, and inevitably, I don't think there's been a year that I've been involved in baseball where there isn't at least, one thing that you tried to do that didn't work. And then you look back and you say, thank God that other team said no. Or thank God they asked for this player instead of that player that we would have sooner traded. And, vice versa. Sometimes there are things that, you didn't do that you say, you know what, maybe we should have done that. That's baseball, but you hope to go into it with the best information that you can and the best process, and then line up on things that are good for your organization.
So in the weeks leading up to the deadline, there were some quotes, namely from Kenley and from Devers, about wanting to add to the team. And then you yourself saying that you guys were going after starting pitching. How much do those calls to action from the players and having your own quotes out there factor into the decisions that are made? And what is it like addressing it with them after those additions didn't happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, I care about what those guys think. The two guys you mentioned, one is a free agent and the other is someone who grew up here. Both of them made choices to be here. And we can say that about Rafi now, obviously. And I mean, he had the choice when he signed as an amateur, but certainly made a big choice this winter to be in the middle of this thing for a long, long time. So I do care what they think. Now, ultimately, we still have our jobs to do and to make the decisions that we think are right. I don't think you're going to get too far, doing things that you don't believe in because other people want you to do them, even if they're people that are very invested in the organization. And I also understand, anytime you're in the hunt, your players are going to want you pretty much exclusively to bring in guys. That's something obviously we want to. They have to be smart moves. I think when you try to, I sort of view it as something where you got to hit it where it's pitched. If you try to lunge at something that you shouldn't, you might end up rolling over and it might not be in your interest. And, the game finds a way to punish you for those things if you chase something you shouldn't, or you chase something in a way that you shouldn't. But, I'm right there with them. We wanted to, make all the good additions that we could. In particular, I think I said it this year, just where this is going and what we believe we're building. We were the most interested in guys that could be with us beyond this year. And those guys tend to cost more, obviously, when they're good players. But to me, I would rather pay a higher price for someone like that that has a chance to be a part of this even beyond 2023. Now, the fact of the matter is not that many of those guys got moved. And, we pursued a lot of those, and, we were in on guys who were pending free agents too, and ultimately didn't line up on any of those. Just didn't feel like what it would have taken was something that was going to be a good baseball move for us. So that's how it fell. And, I obviously talked to those guys and told those guys that, it's not that we don't feel that or disagree with them, just more that I think you gotta make sure you're sticking to making good baseball trades.
I do want to know, and not even saying this in necessarily like, oh God, like they don't want to make the playoffs. Like I know there's a lot of the fan base. It's like, I'm sick of waiting for the future and all that. And trust me, in this podcast, there are times where I get pissed off and I'm like, I want success now because we're fans, Heim, we're homers. How much do you prioritize when the trade deadline comes around? How much do you prioritize with the current situation the Red Sox are in, making the postseason this year versus not wanting to mess with anything for the future? Because I know we obviously want them to make the playoffs this year. We want them to be in the playoffs every year. Of course, obviously, that's the goal. But for the current situation of the Red Sox, how much did that factor into your approach of let's get to the postseason this year versus let's not mess up what the future of this team could be?
Yeah, I wanted to badly, very badly. And especially this year, look, like we talked about, this is a year where we came into the season with a lot of people doubting us and doubting what we were doing. And that motivates me, frankly. And so I want it, I promise you, just as badly as you guys or anybody who's listening to this. We still got to do it the right way. We are not going to get anywhere, trying to sort of cheat the game, basically. And you see it time and again when you do try to take those shortcuts. You might get lucky, but a lot of times, not only does it hurt you down the line, but it might not even help you the way you thought up front. And a lot of why we are in this position this year is because we have done some hard things and we have been patient with some guys and we've tried to stay committed to this core that we're building. And when you really look, obviously we've had some ups and downs and we haven't been perfect and there's plenty of room for improvement. We all know that, but a lot of the good things have happened that have happened because of guys we've needed to stay patient with. And that's hard. It's certainly hard from a fan's perspective, but I don't know how much people realize how hard it is for us too. We feel and say some of the same things during the game as anybody who's watching. You just have to make sure that you're not letting that bleed into your decision-making process. And you have to make sure to remember that a lot of really good things in this game don't come right away. That doesn't mean waiting will always bring them. You have to, and it doesn't mean you sit back passively and wait. You have to attack that process with urgency every day. But you also are, just because you don't get it right away doesn't mean you're not eventually going to get it. And if you try to take shortcuts or you give up on somebody too soon, you often regret it. It's not always, and those are some of the decisions that we need to make. When is the time to step on it? When is the time to let something play out a little bit more? But even if we choose letting something play out a little bit more, that doesn't mean we want to win any less. It just means we believe that course of action is going to lead to more winning. And even if you do that with a longer term in mind, a lot of times it happens sooner than you think because you did it the right way.
I've always been curious how aware players are that they're involved in these conversations. And I'm sure it differs, organization by organization and situation by situation. But this past week, there was a player's wife who posted some stuff on social media expressing, relief that her husband was not moved at the deadline. And when Steve and I first saw it, we thought it was odd because we were under the impression that the Sox weren't accepting offers or accepting calls on this player, right? That had been the report that we had seen at the time. But this morning, a report came out that said that player was involved in a potential trade. And I'm leaving his name out on purpose here. I'm not trying to put you on the spot to confirm or deny the report. But it seemed as though he was aware that he was involved in this potential trade conversation. So what is that like for you? Where does that rank in terms of, importance to make sure that these guys are aware or how common is it that they are aware in general?
Yeah, I think this is one of the toughest parts of the job because I believe, and I get this from a lot of my mentors in the game. I believe in trying to be around, accessible to our guys throughout the year. Fact of the matter is, this time of year, especially in the days leading up to the deadline, every time you walk in a room, people are, wondering if you're walking in there to tell them something. It's funny. Like sometimes leading up to the deadline, like I found myself, there were a couple times we were chasing after players who may have played with one of our guys. So I'm saying, boy, I want to know what our guy thinks of this guy. And I'm sure that as soon as my name pops up on their phone, they're thinking, oh boy.
Yeah.
And so, you open the conversation by saying, hey, I just need some intel. That's why I'm calling.
Yeah.
So, it does. The fact of the matter is, as much as those relationships I hope are real, like this is a time of year when the business side of this business is right in everybody's faces, including ours. I definitely want to be as open with everybody as I can. Sometimes it's a feel thing of if you pull someone aside proactively for a conversation and tell them how this could go, you do it reactively because their name's out there, or you just let them come to you if they need something. I'm not telling you I always pick the right path, but I want to be accessible to guys and to be honest with them. There's a lot of cases where, look, I generally believe, I've said this publicly and I'll say it to players privately. Like, I think, I don't know that I would believe anybody who says like, I will never trade player X or so-and-so is untouchable. We're probably kidding ourselves. Like, again, this is business. It is. And there's almost always a point where it might make sense. So I think if you tell a player that, you're probably lying to them. You could tell them, I don't think it will happen. I don't want to do it, but we might get something we can't turn down. When we have guys here that we want here, we want them to feel wanted and to know that they are wanted. But again, there is a business side where sometimes you need to consider certain things. And I think most guys understand that. It's just sometimes tough when it's in their faces. So I just try to be sensitive to that. This time of year, it becomes very front and center that, we do have some power over their lives and careers that, frankly, is a little imposing. And I think it can make it hard for guys on a day-to-day basis. So you just try to be as real as you can, understanding you can't tell these guys everything. You probably shouldn't tell them everything. But I at least believe you should be honest with these guys that, yeah, you know what, like we're going to listen on everybody. We're going to talk about everybody because that's part of our job.
How much do you, it's a similar question, but how much do you weigh the impact of a player potentially finding out that you're shopping him around through the media or through reports versus you maybe giving a heads up that something might be coming up soon? I know the Alex Verdugo thing, I'm not going to ask you to comment on that if it's true or not, whatever. If there's a player that, let's say, you think you're probably going to hold on to, but you're still seeing, you're being responsible and seeing what is out there, what the offers would be, how much do you weigh in, oh, this guy might find out, it might not be for me, and that might piss him off in the wrong way instead of everyone always going with it'll light a fire under his ass. Obviously, these guys are people too, and they got families, and if they don't know if they're going, they know if they're going. That can impact how they play on the field. Does that come into play, or is it kind of like you mentioned, it is a business, and you got to be able to see what's out there for your players?
Well, both. I mean, it totally can come into play, and that's part of our jobs is to try to feel that out. Would this player benefit from a conversation, or is it something where it's actually not going to help because you can't tell them anything definitive? I do think what sometimes happens is that around this time of year, there can be a lot of rumors where just because somebody's name is in the rumor mill or we're considering, whatever with a player doesn't mean we are shopping them. It might mean, hey, a couple teams hit us up on this guy. We have a responsibility now to figure out what that could mean for us. And we do. And that's just the fact of the matter. And I hope, I like us to run a tight ship and not to have stuff coming out from within our group. And frankly, to me, it's not just about what's right for the Red Sox. It's also just a personal thing for our players. I don't believe we should be doing that to them. I wouldn't want that done to me. So, I try not to treat people in a way that I wouldn't want to be treated, but sometimes stuff does get out. And, when it's a time of year when 30 teams are talking to each other about a lot of different players, there's going to be stuff that gets out. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's real. It doesn't necessarily mean that even if you are talking about the player, it's happening in the way that's been portrayed. So you try to feel that out if a conversation would be good. But again, when you're leading up to the deadline, you can't promise something that you don't know. And most of the time, the case is, hey, yeah, we've gotten some calls. We're listening. We might talk about it. I don't think there's going to be anything from this. That is the case most of the time. So I, having that conversation every single time somebody's name pops up on MLB trade rumors, probably not helpful. But there might be certain cases when you want to do it. But again, you just shouldn't overpromise, because it is, when it's a trade deadline, a lot of stuff can happen. Stuff can pop up in the last hour that you did not anticipate, that you might have to consider seriously because it's good for your team. And so you shouldn't promise people things that you can't promise. I'd rather they be able to trust what we're telling them, even if that's something where, hey, a couple teams have asked about you. I don't know yet what's going to happen. Again, if any of these guys stop me, walking through the clubhouse, I would shoot them as straight as I could of where things stand at that moment. And there have been situations where things do turn, where you feel like, okay, this could be likely that someone would go, or it's pretty unlikely, where depending on how much that player wants to know, you might tell them. Sometimes that's appropriate, and sometimes it's just better to let them function and go through their days without feeling like they're trying to, read a thermometer about like where their stock is on the market.
Yeah. A little bit of a big picture question, just to step away from the nitty gritty of this deadline. For a few years now, I think Red Sox fans have had to adjust their mentality a little bit from a win now mentality every year to a bit of a wait and see mentality, with the promise of longevity attached to that. And I think for a lot of fans, this wait and see stretch might be a little bit longer than they might have anticipated. So I also think that some fans viewed this deadline as the potential end of that wait and see chapter, and maybe the beginning of the make a push chapter. And going strictly off the fact that there was no major splash or big additions, that didn't really turn out to be the case. So as that waiting and building phase kind of extends a little bit more, do you feel a growing pressure to be even better on the other side of this once that go time chapter opens?
Well, I think I would feel that regardless. We want the arrow to keep pointing up. We don't want to be sitting outside of a playoff spot at the trade deadline. We'd rather be holding one. We'd rather be at the top of the division. We got to keep things pointing in that direction. And yeah, when we're in that position, the trade deadline might look a little different, but we're still going to want to do it the right way, because this is baseball and a lot of stuff happens in the playoffs, and you might have to give a team or a core a lot of chances to get to the top of the mountain. And you never want to bet the house all on 1 year. So you want to do it to where you can make those pushes, but you're also sustaining it and that you can continue to grow it. Obviously, the best way to do that is to have a really strong talent pipeline. So you have a lot of moves you can make without putting yourself on that cliff's edge. And that's why it's been such a huge priority for us. It's interesting. Like I think in certain respects, look, what I would say is this. I think this year, obviously, like I said, I do think there's the direction, the trajectory, where the arrow is pointing is probably a lot clearer. I hope it's a lot clearer than it was last year at this time, or even this winter, when you could start to see it come together. You can also see, and the scoreboard will tell you, it is not all the way there yet, and we got to keep pushing, and we got to keep getting better, and we got more work to do. But at the same time, it doesn't always go perfectly in a straight line. But when you do the right things, sometimes you have a chance to have what we had in 2021, where frankly, if you would put us on a schedule after 2020, you probably would have said that was ahead of schedule. But I think the best way to put yourself in position to have those kinds of seasons is not to focus too much on the schedule and just focus on trying to do the right things. And there's going to be ups and downs in this game. And if you try not to cheat that and try to force something just because you said it fit in a certain point in time, or sometimes not do something, you originally thought you would do, but it doesn't fit with where you are. If you just stay true to things that make sense and you stay true to doing it the right way, I think that's the best way to put yourself in the position to be able to do both. I mean, our fans deserve a team that is pushing for it all the time, but also in a position to be doing that every single year. And there are tough choices that come with that. Like, there's no free lunches in life or in this game. But by doing things the right way and staying focused on that, instead of trying to satisfy, some pressure, whether it's real or imagined, or, trying to back up some timetable, you're actually going to have more success if you just focus on doing the right things.
I know you had said that you wanted to add a starting pitcher. I understand that a lot of times it's what the offers are and, how that goes. It's, do we have a legitimate chance to bring somebody in? What would we have to give up? All of that. But I got to say, I was very surprised that no pitching was added, considering the current situation you guys are in with the staff. How close were you to adding pitching? And did it just come down to the typical, like, we weren't willing to give up XYZ player that the other team wanted to get that potentially controllable pitching?
Yeah, in some cases. There were other cases where we went hard after some players that didn't end up moving. In some cases, there were things that we could have done there, but it would have left a hole in our team somewhere else. Not talking about our farm system, but our team that might not have made sense and might have undermined some of what we were trying to do. I do feel like in the deals we made last week for some bullpen help, whether it's now or in the case of the guys we got for Kike that that aren't here now but could help soon, that we tried to get in front of that a little bit, get some guys we liked that we thought, albeit they're not as experienced, but they are probably just as talented as a lot of veteran names that might get thrown around the last couple of days before the deadline. And honestly, would rather bet on those guys that have upside to be here with us for a while if we think the talent level is equivalent to some of the more recognizable names that might get thrown around. So we did get in front of that, I think, on the relief end of things. As far as the rotation goes, again, I know you said I was going to say this. I'm going to say just nothing that we found that made sense. In some cases, there were guys we pursued that didn't move, or where the price just wouldn't have made sense, and it would have basically left us just not even better off, just different in a way that wasn't good, or potentially even worse off. Or in some cases where there's an eye of the beholder thing where you don't control how other teams see your players versus another team's players. We have our opinions, but they're the ones making the deal, so they get to choose obviously where they're going to focus their attention.
How much do the moves of other AL East teams, if at all, have an impact on how you approach the deadline, knowing that this is one of the best divisions maybe ever, that you guys got to stay up with them, you got to stay in that mix, and of course got to pass the Blue Jays if you want to make the postseason? Seeing the Jays and the Yankees added a guy, we don't even know who he is. I had never heard of Middleton. The Yankees suck, so whatever. They didn't really do anything. But how much do you look at what the division is doing and think, oh, okay, we got to keep up with this if we want to compete right now?
I've been in this division basically my whole career.
Yeah.
The way I have always thought about it is that it's always going to be really good. And frankly, the bar just keeps getting higher. This is probably, we have played the first 4 months of the season in the best division in the history of baseball in my mind. And I think probably objectively speaking, and you might've been able to say that last year too. And it's just gotten better. That's just how it is in the AL East. So to me, that says you don't worry too much about what another individual team is doing, because everybody's going to be good. The competition is going to be really good. This is going to be as good as it gets in baseball, and that's just a fact of life. So you got to focus on what you're doing to build your own program, because there's no sense worrying about these other teams. They're going to be good, and we know who we have to beat in the standings. We know what the scoreboard says, but I don't think you're going to have more or less competitive edge because of what another team does, because we take it for granted that these teams are really well run, they're really talented, and they're pushing. And that's just how it is always in the American League East. And so that's just a fact of life, and we got to do what's right for us.
I got a fan question for you, Heim. This one comes in from Joely Gaboni, which is funny because it's kind of similar to my name. But this guy wants to know, do you feel that there is a clear sense of direction between the team, the players, the staff, and the front office?
So this is from Joely, right? This isn't from you?
This is Joely. This is not me. I'm not. I would never ask you this.
Okay.
So, Joely is not on this Zoom with us, so I can't ask for a clarification.
I might be able to clarify for him.
But I mean, I sure hope so. But I'm kind of curious what exactly that question means.
In terms of, I guess in the short term, in terms of this year is probably what Joely means.
Just be as a result of just seeing us not make as many additions as obviously if you're in that clubhouse, if you're in that dugout, you want all the additions you can get. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. The in your eyes, do you feel that the players, the staff, and the front office are all aiming towards the same goal this year?
I sure hope so. I mean, every year we're trying to win. Like I said, try to do it the right way. Try to be smart about it. But I've actually felt that this year. Again, different people are going to have different opinions of how to do it. But I've actually felt that this year, as much as any year that I've been here, that everybody's pulling in the same direction. Everybody's focused on the things that matter. That's why we're in the position we're in. And, again, what I would say is a lot of the things that have pointed us in the right direction are things that in some cases may have confused people at first. People might not have seen the benefits of them at first. There's a lot of things that we've done that, weren't well received at the time, but then you see players from those trades or you see that those moves end up paying off in ways people didn't anticipate. That's why we're here. So this is baseball. Everybody's going to have different opinions. I am sure that if you polled every player in that clubhouse, they'd all have different ideas of what moves they wanted to see us make and who they wanted to see us go get, and what they wanted to see us move to go get those players. That's the nature of the game. I think everybody in there is trying to win. I think they know that we are too. That's part of why we've pushed ourselves into contention, and hopefully it continues from here.
We're wrapping up here, Heim. We got some listener questions. These aren't too crazy, but you can do more of a rapid fire. You don't have to give, super long answers for these, but definitely like incorporating the listeners when we can. This one was from Danny. Is starting pitching going to be a big focus in the offseason?
I think so. Again, we'll get there when we get there, but that's obviously something that you always need, and the offseason is a good time to set yourself up for it. I think the fact that some of our young pitchers have come along the way they has given us some options. And the more you always need more than 5, right? You probably most years you need more than 10 at some point. You need guys to jump in, and the more of our young pitchers step up, the more we know we have those options. So then it becomes a little bit easier to narrow the pool of guys from the outside that we might go pursue.
Comes in from Pat. What's the process like with other executives? How do they transpire, and how difficult are the trade negotiations? Basically, just like what would a typical negotiations process look like at the deadline?
Totally depends on, the team, the person, the relationships. And it's not just me on the phone either. We have depending on relationships, there are a few of us that'll have these conversations simultaneously. And sometimes you need that as you get down to the buzzer, just to be able to cover everything that could come up. To me, a lot of this, you're trying to find matches, right? This isn't a bank robbery. You can't just get a player because you want a player. You have, if you want a player that somebody has, you got to make it make sense for them. So
how
much
sick would that be, though, right? If you could just be like it was a video game, you're like, I'm just gonna get that guy.
Yeah.
Otani's here, boom, done.
Breaking, the Red Sox have hijacked Shohei Ohtani.
Legally and morally questionable, but you do you, I guess. But yeah, so it depends. I mean, leading up to the deadline, I think a lot of it is just being in touch with teams to understand what they're trying to accomplish. And a lot of that then could be about, okay, who do they have that might fit us? Let's find out if these players are realistically in play, if it's worth us spending time on this. And sometimes you don't know. You might not even know till the last day, man. You've been chasing after someone for a while, and it turns out they don't see a match with you, or they don't actually want to trade the player. That happens sometimes. And vice versa. Sometimes something pops up that, oh man, something changed on their end where they actually really want to move this guy. We might be able to go get him. So you don't get that without conversation. But to me, it's just about trying to have other teams understand what we're looking to accomplish, who we like, get the same thing from them, and then you could start negotiating. And obviously, everybody's trying to get what they want and give up as little as possible. So there is some cat and mouse with it. We're trying to read conversations, figure out if somebody's really at their bottom line or if there's more room. Is it really going to take this, or is it lower than that? Is it worth trying to hold the line and wait? Are we going to have to push? You try to feel that out through conversation, and hopefully you find a match. And we know 29 other clubs are trying to do that with us.
Closest thing that I've mentioned that we would get is fantasy football, where we don't want to give any of our players up, but we want to acquire like the best wide receiver in the league. That kind of does feel like how it would go at your level. Obviously different. There's a lot more layers to it, but that's dumbing it down. From Sammy, favorite Jewish athlete. We love to talk about our small pool of athletes, says Sammy.
Oh, that's a good one. I didn't expect that one. Favorite Jewish athlete. So I will say this: when I was a kid, growing up as a Phillies fan, I was so stoked that Mike Lieberthal was Jewish. obviously there's probably guys with like, the Koufaxes and the Greenbergs of the world that you'd probably put on a pedestal ahead of him. But, just as a Philly kid growing up, I thought that was cool.
Brett asks, what hair product do you use? Do you use hair product, or is that just getting out of bed?
I'm actually way overdue right now for a haircut. So I these days I have to, just to keep from looking entirely ridiculous and settle for looking mostly ridiculous. I don't actually know what it's called, but it's not something I lose too much sleep over. Again, I'm just trying to look halfway presentable.
All right, 2 more quick ones for you from our buddy Gordo. What was the mood like in the war room after the deadline passed?
I think there's sort of an exhale because it's tense and there's so much work that's gone into it. So there's a little bit of like, it's the first time everybody's head sort of stops. We work on so many different things that ultimately there is going to be a feeling of probably a little bit of an emotional letdown because 5, 6, 7 deals didn't happen in the last hour. I've been in rooms where that happens and it's exhilarating. Again, sometimes you find out even there's some things that might happen at the end that you're happy you did. You wouldn't have done them otherwise, but you don't yet know what significance they're going to have. In 2021, we traded for Austin Davis at 357 and for Hansel Robles at 358. Look, it took for the first few weeks probably that each of those guys was here. We didn't get a whole lot from them. And then, Hansel saved our season in September, basically. AD came up huge against Soto that last weekend. Sometimes these things pay dividends down the road, and it is exhilarating when there's something right at the end. So I think usually it's the first time everybody can kind of look around the room and take a breath. The nature of this is that I think our group probably spent time on between big leaguers and prospects and everywhere in between, 200-300 players over the course of the last month.
Sheesh.
And we acquired 4 of them. So, but that's how it is. That's what you do every year. That's why your scouts are out there all year, because if you get in a position on the 30th or the 31st and the 1st, when something comes up and you didn't see that player or you haven't done enough work on him, you can't make up for it. So the nature of it is you spend a lot of time. And I think there's a sense of accomplishment of like, we were in position on the things we needed to be in position on.
Last listener question for you, and this is probably a tough one, and a lot of people are asking it, so I understand if you want to pass. This comes in from Thomas. Have you seen the Barbie movie yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Why?
At least you didn't pass.
Just curious. Should I?
No, I can't see you seeing the Barbie movie. You seem like an Oppenheimer guy. You seem like
I guess if you want to stereotype me, probably more so, but I actually haven't seen either. I mean, I don't even when it's not trade deadline season, I live a very boring life and I tend not to go see movies anyway. Probably should. So I guess I got to catch up with that. I'll probably see him eventually, but it might end up being like on a plane sometime.
Yeah, the headlines that would come out if in trade deadline season you were caught at the movie theaters, they would run.
Well, if he had the pink cup, if it was coming out of Barbie instead of making any deals, that would I would laugh at first. Let me tell you, the first thing I would do is laugh. But then I'd be like, "What?"
So speaking of Pink, as you may know, Pink did 2 shows here, Monday and Tuesday.
Flipping around like crazy. Did you see that? Were you in the? You're probably trying to make trades. And she's like,
we're here Monday. She's performing out there. Place is going nuts, and. We basically normally the night before the deadline's a late night anyway, but our game was starting late, right? We're on the West Coast. So we're going to hang around and watch the game. And it's there's a lot of noise out there. There were a couple of times when, I sometimes do this when there isn't a concert, you need a little mental break. We work at Fenway. You can walk around Fenway. It's a pretty good mental break. So I poked my head out there just to take in some of the show. It was actually really cool. Different crowd than the usual Red Sox crowd, I will say that. But, like we're in here, trying to figure out, how to sort through the starting pitching market. And she's out there suspended from her ankle, spinning around, singing at the top of her lungs. It's a cool scene.
I'm dying thinking that you got a call from a team, and this could be like a franchise-altering trade. And in the background, just so what? I'm still a rock star. It's like, God, come on, you gotta calm down. If she's doing
if the phone rings, then you got to duck back inside.
Yeah.
Honestly, what's more common at this time of year, I'm sure this has happened with me, and like sometimes it happens with some counterparts, is you're talking to someone about a deal and their kids are screaming or your kids are screaming. And as I think I told you guys, like my children, at least the two older ones, they have opinions about the game of baseball, about our team, about players. So if they overhear something in conversation, they may try to butt in and give me a piece of their minds.
Yeah. I just can't picture like Pink. Pink was doing crazy stuff. I don't know why she became the person that's like doing a million flips in the air and being, twirled around all of Fenway. Props to her. It looks like pretty dangerous. If anything goes wrong, that is a very bad result. But yeah, she was rocking Fenway, dude. I can't believe, I don't know how much pull you have on this, but I told Joey this all the time. Some of the concerts at Fenway just appeal to the most random audiences. Like I wish we could have somebody that I want to see at Fenway Park. And there's one coming up, Joe. What's the one coming up that I actually probably would want to go to?
I don't know.
The country one. What's the country one that I'm blanking on?
Morgan Wallen.
Morgan Wallen. I think I would want to see Morgan Wallen, but I saw Justin Timberlake and Jay-Z there 10 years ago. If we could get, because kids like me that love the hip hop, if we could really appease to that audience, that would be great.
I have zero influence on that. I hate to disappoint you guys. I was
disappointment on Joey's face that I even mentioned
for about 5 minutes on Monday night, and then I was fighting through that crowd trying to get out of here and get in a car to go to the airport to go to Seattle Tuesday night. After the deadline. But it is cool. I mean, it's I have to think as a performer, it's probably a pretty cool venue to play. And our people do an amazing job. I mean, and turn this place, like we're going to be ready for a huge series tomorrow. And this place had a totally different situation in it last night, the night before that. And the work that facilities and the grounds crew does getting this place ready for baseball after some of those shows is outstanding.
Dave Miller pulls miracles. I don't know how he does it, but yeah, the fact that tomorrow is going to be a huge game, obviously in division with the Jays, and you'd have no idea that Pink was twirling around for 3 days. The last question I have for you, it's a light one, but I'm genuinely curious. When you see yourself, do you see yourself first off on the broadcast? Because they'll put you on the broadcast in the box that you're in. Do you ever notice that you're on there and then try to act super normal and not act like you just saw yourself on the screen?
That has happened. I mean, I'm kind of used to it by now.
They keep it on you. They keep it on you for like maybe 5 seconds too long, and I'm like, Heim definitely knows he's on camera and he's trying to act normal right now.
That does happen sometimes. I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. But of course, like there's a little bit of a delay. So by the time you notice, like you've already been on. Yeah. And then if you had started to say something that you wouldn't want any lip readers picking up on, which that has happened to me on broadcasts, where I realized too late that was on TV, and I'm thinking, oh man, like I really hope nobody could understand what I was saying. Again, it's probably not that different from a lot of the stuff our fans.
We're going to trade Rafael Devers. I couldn't believe they caught you saying that. That was nuts. But yeah, that is fun. I didn't even think of that part, the lip sync part, because people are really good. I mean, John Boy's obviously the GOAT, but like I feel like you can't say anything now that could be in distance of a camera without being worried that it's going to be some big story and on Twitter or on the X app. That would be crazy.
Which is kind of impossible.
That's part of what makes it fun is you understand, like, we're all real people, but we're also characters in the soap opera. That's just part of the deal. And frankly, it's going to be better for you if you just embrace that and understand that that's the case. You were talking, we were talking about it before we started, about just fans and how they react to certain players if they're slumping and then they pull themselves out of it, and everybody just wants to win. And everybody that is part of this organization, they know has some role to play in that, whether it's us in the office, whether it's the coaches, whether it's the players, and people care about how we're doing our jobs. So, they want to know, which I get and understand. And I'll tell you what, like I told you guys this in spring training. I think we talked about those. I know what the headline of Winter Weekend was, but I told you guys, I think, about those two teenagers that stopped me and wanted to know, why we protected David Hamilton. That is pretty special, honestly. It's really cool that people care that much and that they follow it that closely. And could I do with that without some of the being on TV? Absolutely, but it's all part of it. It was actually funny when we had the Mets here, the Sunday night game. they mentioned this, ESPN mentioned this on the broadcast. I was supposed to go on with them in the booth, and I missed the game because my son broke his arm and had to have surgery.
Oh, the disrespect by your son to ruin a national
Yeah,
game.
and so, probably there was a point where you could have seen me like showing something on my phone to one of my colleagues in a subsequent game. I wasn't there for that one, and might have thought it was like a text from another GM, and it was probably just like my son's X-ray. It was busted humerus. So like, it's
things can get taken out of
you
context.
never know what happens in
Yeah,
that suite. But yeah, that was a much longer answer. The short answer to your question is yes. That has
I knew it. I'm just glad you confirmed. I knew that Heim notices he's on TV and then acts normal, but I'd probably do the same thing. I don't know what else you're supposed to do. Heim Bloom, welcome to the ITM Hall of Fame. 3 members. You were the 3rd member, and it's a hell of a group. And yeah, let's just make the playoffs. Yeah, make the playoffs. Underdog Sox. Make the postseason. Let's have some fun. We're already planning our trip to Minnesota, so excited to see you there. Win the first 2 games, then on to the ALDS. That's the plan. If you want to know what the plan is for your own team, I just let you know.
I'll sign up for all that right now. Honestly, underdogs are not, that's whatever. Let's just win.
That's a perfect way to put it. Whatever. Let's just win. Perfect. I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you hopping on.
You got it, guys. Good to see you again.